my mum said, I sound really good on paper. I think I was here a century ago, and Mercedes Matter was here. And I realized I could have never gotten into this school. So it's odd that I am here now. And I'm going to tell you, it was Joe Santori who made this happen, and I'm going to kill him. We were in school together at Yale. Believe it or not, then Joe made gigantic abstract paintings. He probably won't admit it, but he did them with mops and brooms, I swear to you. But they all had these gigantic themes of, you know, gods and goddesses. And Mike, I'll do it. I have it. So, when I got to Yale, I met Al Hohlt. I think I can get this. Hold on. No. Now I'm pressing all these little buttons and nothing's happening. There, I got it. It's on. So, I was sort of an ignorant painter. I didn't know much. I made big things, and I think that was the reason Al brought me there. Because he said he liked the box the paintings came in, because they were 8 feet by 15 feet. Not the paintings, yeah? Our first meeting was, I think he said, Joan, this is true, right? He said, so you're the new dumb blonde? I said, and you're the janitor? So we never agreed on anything. We argued for as long as he was alive. He talked to me like I was an artist. That interested me, since that I never talked at all about much of anything. So when he came to the studio, and you have to understand, I would be in tears most of the time when he left, and he had the courage to come back. He could care less. He had been married to Yvonne Rainer. He was married at the time to Sylvia Stone, a wonderful sculptor. He lived next door to Lucy Lippard. He knew Eva Hesse. So he knew some pretty tough women out there. So I was nothing by comparison. So anyway, he did demand that I look at paintings across the street at the Yale Art Gallery. There was a great museum. You know, he would come in every week and say, what did you see? What did you learn? What are you doing? This is crap. And I would have to kind of figure out what I was doing and defend myself. So the bad news is I have way too many slides. The good news is I'm pretty fast. Did you? Yeah, can you? Yeah, I forgot about those. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Just in case you don't know, that's an Al Hohlt painting. That was me. I think that's around 2000. At this time, I was teaching at Bard College. I've been there for 21 years. And I didn't have a place to stay, so I would be at his home. And, you know, I'd be arriving at 11 o'clock at night, and he would say, let's go talk about my paintings. So, I made him buy me dinner. I'm going to go through these. This was my $150, 2,000 square foot loft in Soho in 1973. At this point, I had 13 puppies who ate everything and moved everything around. Now, you have to understand, I did study painting, but after the first year at Yale, I literally kind of stopped making them. The good news was, if you didn't have paintings, no one would talk to you, except Al, of course, but because you couldn't bring them down to the pit to be critiqued. So anyway, And Al freaked out about this work. He had no idea what I was doing. What I thought I was doing was having an argument with all those guys who make minimalism, who own materials like they, you know, like no one could ever touch rubber or steel or resin or whatever. Everyone sort of was copying materials. I was very close to Canal Street. There were lots of that at that time. There were lots of hardware stores. So, and I had no money. I was a framer at Bark Frameworks. I was working with different, I was sanding floors from Zelf. You know Zelf, right? You know Zelf. I was pretty good at that. Anyway, it was my first job at Cal Arts, and it was a Walt Disney school, so my first thing I did is I made this sort of Steamboat Willie thing. And so you can tell I'm sort of trying to use cheap materials because that's all I could get, but trying to really learn about space. And because I was a painter, there were lots of things that painters could do. They could have illusions, they could have color, they could have space, they could talk about many things. So it wasn't just the nature of the material. And I was on a roll, you know, like, for instance, there was the year of aluminum foil. And at that point, I was living in my next loft after my Soho space was in fashionable Tribeca, and it was $175, and it was 3,000 square feet. It used to be Richard Serra's. So, since I'm not a fan of his, nor he of me, I remember thinking, he's going to hate this. And then I would be happy. Yeah? So this is that studio in Tribeca. Yeah? So you can see I made aluminum pots and pans, aluminum foil pots and pans. Some of these objects, when you pick them up, they had eccentric weight in them because they were being pounded on the floor, because they would be like a ball of aluminum foil, and I would crush them really dense. So when you pick them up, they were like a Joe Palooka doll. They would just fall over. Why I thought that was interesting, I don't know. I have to tell you, at Yale, you walked in the door, the figure painters went to one side, and the abstract painters went on the other side. I swear to you. True? True? Yeah, true. See, Joe was an abstract painter, so we could talk. So this was a moment in my life when I thought, I'm confused about my relationships. So I made images literally for people I knew and my relationship to them. And depending on what they were doing and what they were made of, they were sort of portraits in that way. I will tell you that was Richard Archfager. It's made out of rock maple. He's a tough Yankee guy who's as smart as anyone you'll ever meet. And I didn't understand a word he was saying, so I thought, you know, but he thought that was a portrait of me dealing with him, not a portrait of him. That's how smart he was. So, at this point, this was Irving Sandler's big show at the Neuberger, and he asked me to be in it. It was 7 years after I had shown at Artist Space, which I think it was 74, wasn't it? Something like that. Yeah, and at that moment, I'd just come back from California. I was teaching at Cal Arts. I got a $10,000 grant. I bought a lot of plastic. And at that moment, this museum, the Neuberger, didn't have a director. So I was just painting things and making things and gluing things and going down in the basement, and it was like a free-for-all. I didn't know that all museums weren't like that, you know. Anyway, this was a show that I was very proud of because it's a huge gallery. It was 100 feet by 50 feet by 30 feet high, and these figures now, you can tell they kind of are clustered. There would be little narratives that went through it. But to handle that space with maybe, a couple 100 pounds of material, there was, the weight, there was no weight. It had a kind of a fission, it kind of ricocheted around, I thought. And the good news was I got to meet Ree Morton, Thomas Langham Schmidt, Charles Simmons, I'm forgetting everyone, Laurie Anderson. So Irving had brought together these artists who had shown in his space, and he, by the way, he's here, so I have to remember these things correctly, he first introduced alternative spaces, and artist space was phenomenal at the time, still is. So these are variations. You can see the figure is sort of there, it's sort of emulsifying. This was a show in Houston, Texas. What was happening at the time was all these figures, who I identified and knew who they were kind of falling apart. I'm not the best builder. And so a head would be on the floor, an arm would break off, and something freaked me out about that. So I was lost in this show. And this show is called Charms, as in a particle of subatomic physics. Not because I know anything about it, but I had been married when I was 16 to a physicist. And I thought, I never said thank you. So, there. But after that, this was in Houston, for $50 you could go to the Yucatan. And I went to the Yucatan, and this is what I started to build in my studio, which was now in Greenpoint. I used to think if realtors followed me, they could make real bargains. So this is, I guess, 1979 or so, something like that. This was the work that I showed at Holly Solomon. Now, I liked the way this stuff looked. But when I got to Holly's, which is a gallery, Holly Solomon was one of the great dealers, I think, a little nutty. We were perfect together. The work kind of went dead. So the installation part of my work really was to bring life back into this imagery. And again, this was to my mind, fierce dialogue against all those guys. And I like those guys. It's not like I didn't like them. I just thought they had so many rules and so specific about what was good art. And then I think in the Yucatan, I thought, they don't know that. They have color, they have the fish, the birds, the plants, everybody. I mean, when you're alive, color suits that. So that was really what I wanted, is something that had transparency and was buoyant, I guess, in that way. These were the drawings. That was actually bigger than the projection. It was about 14 feet by about 5 or 6 feet. It's all glitter. I do love glitter. I still love glitter. When I came to Yale, I actually brought a couple 100 pounds of it with me, which, made me one of their favorites. This was my show at Holly Solomon. You're walking through about 60 feet of space. Things get really smashed together in these images. It was called Deep Water. What I wanted was when you walked across, it felt like you were walking down or going down. Now, it doesn't look like that actually worked, but that's what I thought it was doing. And it sort of was a freaky thing for New York City. It actually had a lot of response, both good and bad. And I sort of was in Time magazine, or no, maybe news, something. It kind of hit. And I think this kind of way of working, because it was all thrown away, and it was done for the space, and it was painterly, it wasn't conceptual, it wasn't You didn't have to read any French philosophers at all. It was very experiential and kind of, I think, emotional probably is one of something that I think I've always had. It's a rotten slide image. This was in the Whitney Biennial. That was in the Hirshhorn, the last one. This is in the Whitney. You can tell because of the ceiling. So as much as that one image for Holly was about the water and this flow, I wanted this to be about fire and smoke. It was called Dragon. It was also had two parts. You can't see anything from, I don't know, because the way this stuff goes into the camera, but it was in the Whitney and there was a diagonal orientation. And one part looked kind of like medieval color and pageants and stuff, and one was very smoky, like sort of St. George and the Dragon, which is sort of something I sort of grew up with, liking that image. Same piece. This was actually a detail of a gigantic show at the Ringling Museum. I'm drinking wine. The Ringling Museum of Art. And what was happening is the work kind of got, this piece was called Rorschach, so there was sort of a darkening, I think, of the imagery. And so it's still this reference to landscape, this imagined landscape. But there was, I think, in fact, a darkening happening. This was in Massachusetts. And because it was in the University of Massachusetts, you'd think I would know that it was in Massachusetts. I thought it was in Vermont, because it was Amherst. And I thought, I'm going to meet all these woodsmen. We are going to cut down trees, and I'm really going to learn something. The only thing that is in Amherst is professors. So anyway, I'm really bad with big print and small print. So what was interesting about this piece for me is it was very shallow. It was maybe 10 feet across, 8, you could touch the ceilings. It was the most claustrophobic space I had ever been in. And I think, obviously I made it more so, but what happened that I thought was interesting was when you walked through and there were these tubes, as you see, your breath would be amplified. And so you could hear yourself breathe. And it was a funny kind of obstacle course. So you kind of had to maneuver. So it felt like sculpture. You have to understand, I have never had a sculpture class. So, and I saw your rooms here. This is real sculpture happening here. I have never carved, or maybe, no, that sort of carving is with a chainsaw, but, and certainly never made anything out of clay or, anyway, it looked interesting to me here. This was in the Venice Biennale in 1981 or 2, I forget. What I thought was interesting was that I saw no one for weeks. There was no electricity, there was no bathroom. This was on, see, the small print comes in handy in a place like that. It was on the Giudecca at the Magazzina de Sala. I'm probably saying everything wrong. But since I had time and the work hadn't showed up, the parts hadn't shown up, I smashed holes in this very ancient building. I got a scaffolding and painted the ceiling, which was quite high. And I just thought, this is so Italian. I'm being really Italian. And like the futurists. Also, this was called Either War. So at this moment, the Falkland Islands War was going on. All of Italy at the time was on strike. At least you couldn't get across the canals. So something about war, and my grandmother was in the RAF, women's RAF. She had made, she had been a seamstress, so her friends, the women, were in this group that sewed up these balloons that protected London. So the thing that she would talk about was really not the bombs, but the sounds of these planes which would smash into these helium-filled balloons, and the sound was above you, and you kind of, things just rained down. So there was something about that, memory of that. Literally, when I do an installation, I kind of have to keep myself awake and alive and think of something that's applicable, and it's about the space, about what I'm feeling, about where I am. So sometimes I'll think, well, it does look Italian. That was good. That's enough. That's me building this thing. This is, I was telling Graham, this is where I get a little political. This was in Germany, in Cologne. There was, as in the Venice Biennale, I did not represent the United States. There's a corridor or spaces where it's lots of artists. There were these invitational shows. This was a show that was called Westkunst, Western Art, 1935 to 1981. Millions of square feet of space. They had rebuilt, Joseph Beuys's first show, Klaus Oldenburg's first show, Schwitter's. They had everybody, Hockney, everyone, Baselitz, Polka, everyone. There were not one woman in that historical section. There were millions of artists in that, not one woman. And I hadn't noticed, because at Yale, I was one of not many there. I'd never had a woman teacher. And at the time, I don't know if you know this, but all those history books, Gardner's and Jansen's, there were no women in them. And that went back to the Stone Age, right? I mean, so, it dawns on me there must have been something wrong. This is a repeat slide. I don't know how that happened. These are the drawings. This was a show I really liked. It was at the Albright Knox. I don't know if you know that collection. It's one of the most incredible abstract expressionist collection. And this was an homage to all of them. I know it looks like the other ones, but it really was more specific than these collapsed things. Look, this was the Clifford Still room. So obviously I started with a kind of Clifford Still kind of chunkiness and heavy physical color with the oranges and blacks. It actually cascaded down a staircase. It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors. This was a show, again, you're looking really through a lot of space, so you're going to have to pull it out. At Holly Solomon's, a few years later, 7 years I think later, it's the first time I'd ever gone back to a space and did another piece there without bringing the memories of what was first there. This was going to be my swan song. I was never going to make another installation. I had had it. My friends have had it. I was in debt. I was, fit to be tied. I can be a little irascible. And so that was it. So this was everything I knew. I jammed it in there with everything I knew. And then I did another installation. But this one was in Japan. And they gave me a lot of money. And I was clean. And I had wonderful assistants. The fellow up there, the white T-shirt, who looks like Lou Reed, was Bill. Great fellow, Leah. Anyway, this was the piece I made for them. If you have time and money and support, things look better. So this really was an homage to Tokyo, the country, the culture. It's a big woodcut on the floor. A lot of these shapes you see actually say something. They're kanji. So that says tree. Over there it says flat, flat, flat. One image says river. What I didn't know is everyone who I met, Kawanishi-san, east or west of river. So everyone's name who helped me was in the piece. It was in there. So I liked that idea. The Japanese freaked out. They couldn't even look at it. And what I really didn't understand is that because they're so refined that, you know, if you use bamboo, bamboo is very valued, you know, material. If you use clay, if you're a calligrapher, if you do woodcuts, it's so specialized. To do all of the above, not acceptable. And also, I thought it was like big ikebana. No. And also this plastic, that freaked them out the most. I thought in the farm, when you go around the country, they had this, you can't get plastic this color here. It's called phylon. It's a corrugated fiberglass. They thought it was like putting them down, or, you know, some criticism. Anyway, that's another image of that. The space was a lot like the Guggenheim. Holly Solomon moved uptown, and I had to learn how to make things. And I thought, what do artists do? They make, it's like you got your portraits, you got your landscapes, you got your still lifes. These were all still lifes. And I have to tell this story because it's actually funny. You see all those spheres? They're actually, I came back from Japan, and I was driving home in my truck, and somehow I found, I think I was going to Kiel's, I don't know. There was this place that had all these woks for sale on the sidewalk on 13th Street. And they were going out of business. We loaded up the truck with a million, I still have woks all over the place. And so I made this wok show, you know, I mean, but the funny thing is when we were filling up the truck, the fellow said to me, oh, there's a famous artist who lives next door, do you know him? And I thought, oh no, this is really going to be awful. I said, I don't think so. What's his name? Frank Stella. And all I can remember saying was, has he bought any woks? And he hadn't. And the guy was actually surprised that he hadn't. I thought, yes, I said, you know, I'll take every wok you have. Anyway, so that was one of the images in it. This is called supermercado, as in supermarket. So this I think, looks real American. This is my, like, Stuart Davis something. This was at John Weber Gallery. Across from this was a Saul LeWitt piece, which was in circles, black and white. And I said this a million times, it looked like we had the same homework. This was in the Whitney Biennial. This was The Death of Me. I forget what was said, but you know how everybody says they don't read their reviews? I read them. I collapse. Anyway, this was called NYCBQE. So it was really about New York City and coming to Brooklyn, and I don't know, all the bodegas, and when Al saw it, he said, yes, but it, you know, I said, well, it's sort of urban. He said, no, suburban, because of the chairs and tables. Anyway, but what was happening, you can see this show. That was Jeff Koons' Bunny. That was, I forget. There was across here. There was a Barbara Kruger, big screaming rhesus monkey. So the whole thing sort of looked like some comment about this. It was really embarrassing. It was so embarrassing. But what I was beginning to get interested in is this kind of the underskeleton, how things were structured, how you get off of the wall. So for me, there's a lot of this stuff is actually, and everyone thinks it's paper or cardboard. It's steel. Everything is, except when it's not steel. But it's a lot of weight to it. But anyway, so the structuring of these things became interesting to me. See how nice that slide looks? That's in my new space upstate. It's got nice light. This was the year of I will use no more color. I've had it with color. I get into so much trouble. It's seen as cheap, decorative. Now, you have to understand that we're talking about a different time. Now, everything is okay. It's just that there were more things to bump up against then. And also, I was going to Pilchuck, which is a glass-blowing place, where they have like the most beautiful people who will do anything for you. So we made lots of glass, which I broke. But the thing about the breath and making these volumes, I don't know, I was really intrigued by that. Some color came back. There's lots of glass in these things. This was called Planetary Time. I forget, the snail, I think that was called the snail. This was called Barcelona, as in Gaudí image. I love him, and I thought this sort of had an aspect of what I liked about him. These are bed springs. They were in the lot right next to me in Brooklyn, and they were all burnt. And this is called straw into gold, and I like the metaphor of like taking something which was so sad and just sort of like obviously brightening it up, but sort of like doing something with it. And I thought this looked very Duchamp. I don't know. This is my studio in Brooklyn that I had up until a year or so ago. This is my friend. This is Ursula von Riddingsvard on the bottom, and I'm on the top. And this, I have to tell you about Papo Colo and Jeanette Ingberman. They ran Exit Art. I miss it. They were like the best, most creative curators ever. And they also had this little space on Canal Street. And they were doing these shows where they had two artists that had some connection to each other, their friendships or, something. Both Ursula and I were in Brooklyn, in the studio in Brooklyn. And we both were invited, because we were friends, to see this space. And both of us said almost simultaneously, we'll just fill it up. So it literally, you could scoot by, but there was no space. And Colo did a wonderful performance around it. Anyway, this was called Zygmunt, which is actually Ursula's brother. And I didn't know that was his name. It was on the side of his truck. And I just thought that was a great name with all those Z's and shapes. And anyway, Zygmunt. Now, after that, I got used to having that wood around the house. Ursula uses cedar exclusively. So I was in Seattle, and I would call and I'd say, Ursula, they got cedar. They got cedar roots, they got cedar shakes, they got cedar siding. It's like, and Ursula's like, no, not that kind of cedar. Anyway, I got used to the color and the feel and the smell of it. And I think you can tell now the work is not so wall-bound. It sort of has, more space. That's the back of that. This was a show, kind of a mini survey at the Elvium Museum. And Irving wrote, he's here, and his wife is here, wrote a book for me, a monograph. based basically on a lot of the whole thing, but the LVM did it. This was a piece on the rooftop of the Denver Art Museum. I can't even talk about that one. This was at Exit Art. There's a lot of sinew and stuff. I think this language of the exterior really reversed lately. I was actually talking to Kiki Smith. I was so upset that everything I do is about where I go and stuff, and there was nothing kind of internal, and she just said, "Are you crazy? Like, this stuff looks like, you know, the body and networks of, you know, synapses and da-da-da." And I was so pleased. One, I think she's one of the great artists, but I like that she saw it that way, that she saw the work as being really related to emotions and the body, I guess. Studio in Brooklyn with the glass and this fiberglass resin, which I can't use anymore because it makes me sick. Literally, it makes me sick. But it's cool, isn't it? It's like so beautiful. I just love that. And it can do anything. So that's the studio also. Those are the drawings that I was doing at the same time. I was younger. This was my assistant, Laura Gale. She was one of my students at Bard. Has a memory, she's got a photographic memory, so if she was here tonight, she would say, that wasn't the name of that. That wasn't the year of that. Anyway, that's how we work, that's how I work. I do all the framing. I don't play well with others in that way. We do trucking, we do the framing, I do the, you know, it's all unprofessional. This was at Brandeis. Carl Belts was the curator there, one of the great, great curators, directors of the Brandeis Art Museum. This piece was called Elephant. I was doing a big project and didn't know what to do for this show, and I was sitting in a truck in the middle of a blizzard in Waltham, Mass, in tears, thinking, what am I going to do? And this tree fell down in front of me. So you just have to have a little patience. This was at Columbus, Ohio. I think you can see I took out the whole ceiling. I lowered the temperature in Columbus, Ohio, in that museum by 10 degrees. I had taught at Ohio State in 1974, and all I remember is being cold, so I have a feeling I gave it back. Bad images. This was at the Andre Emmerich Gallery, a fancy gallery. They closed a few months later, after being in business for like 100 years, I don't know. Anyway, this was the most zen-y. I was now living on the river in Kingston, New York. And all I was looking at is the river going by. There would be storms. These trees would float by. It was an interesting show for me. You can't tell there was tons of steel in that show. It was just ribbons of steel. It had a nice feel. I did represent the United States at Sao Paulo Biennale. What I like, this is an Oscar Niemeyer building, and it usually shows industrial products. Actually, that's what it was built for. And every time they had installed this biennial, which is a big deal show in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, all these windows were blocked up because it was very hard. You couldn't hang paintings on them, and people didn't, even if they had sculpture or projections or something. So there was a nice, very nice inside-outside thing, and what you can't tell, and I wish they were there would be, this park is like Central Park, it's called Ibirapuera, and you'd have people, kids with, playing soccer and skateboards, and it was called, in Portuguese, I guess, or Brazilian, Crown of Thorns, Coroa de Espinhos. And it was based on these churches that I found and I had the floor plan of the churches in this piece. I made a second floor. Try and do that at any museum in the United States. This is in Philadelphia. It's pretty big. That's a part of it. Because it was in Philadelphia and I love Calder and I don't like public art, I thought it should float. It should be like an odalisque. It should not be a big thing that people have to walk around. No one kind of sees it, which I kind of like. It sort of really is ambient. And there are star clusters. If a child wanted to find a constellation, they could. And I don't know. I will never do any. I don't do them anymore. This is a show I like. This was in, I don't know where it was. I do, Dartmouth. I thought it was like Madame Blavatsky. I thought it was really weird and kind of set kind of, I don't know. I liked it very much, and it was. The shape of the gallery is like a fish. So it has these double curves. There was something I could do about seeing, something about color, something about some, it's not, I can't say spiritual because I'm not, but it had something. This was right after 9/11. My place in Tribeca was a few blocks away from the World Trade Center. And I was supposed to do a show in Savannah, and I was not in good shape. And I thought, I'm just going to do restoration. That's all I'm going to do. So I made I can't even believe I don't have an image of it, but that is a huge dome. So it's made of lath and plaster. A lot of these images are from the molding from all the old homes. So it was kind of, just felt like old-timey, but sort of like something being made, yeah, instead of something falling down. This was at the LVM. That was a space that you could, in theory, it was a maze that was like a church in Spain. The LVM, now the Chazen, is a place that has so many staircases and so much concrete that I thought built more staircases. But I also gave them a garden. You can't tell, but they're gardens. I don't know, can you tell anyone? You can see there's a garden there, and they were there, and under the stairs and on top of stairs, so they were gardens. It's super cold in Madison, and it's really a tough place. There's concrete buildings, so I thought, all those teachers and students could drink coffee in there, which I think they did. This is a drawing show in Japan. Yeah. So you can see I kind of mash things together no matter what. These are prints. I make prints at Tandem Press. They take care of me. Paula Panchenko is a phenomenal person. They let me do things. I make things really big a lot of times and complicated. This was the first set of prints I did for them. I told her this was actually one print, not 9 or whatever it looks like. She said yes, and then, of course, not. But that was my idea. It was like playing dominoes. They kind of all linked together in that way. This was a show not so long ago. I think it was the most articulate I had been in terms of the imagery, the architecture. I had just bought a house upstate, which was a Victorian house, and I'd just done that thing in Savannah with the restoration. So there were lots of nods to Japanese architecture, Islamic architecture, pagan plain, post and beam. And it really looked good when the sun came through it. That's the second room in the same show. I think you can see there's a big mandala right there. Stage set I did at the Frank Gehry. It was for an opera called Regina. I actually never saw that. Hell died a week before that opened. So this was a show I built for him, for my mom and a few other people. There are moments in your life when everyone dies, it seems. And then it stops, and then again it starts. But anyway, I think it was the most... I knew what I was doing. I knew what I wanted it to feel like. That's really rare. That's my dog, Willie. So it was very... I don't even know if it was good. It was moody. There was a lot of black, a lot of white. I mean, I know that's silly, symbols, but that's what I thought it should be. You see how nice the sun is there? Moments. What was funny, sometimes there would be a window cleaner who was on ropes and he'd be coming by, and I'd fucked up his window, so. Anyway, this is my studio upstate, which I cannot heat. And I'm making these forms. They're styrofoam. Really easy. None of my stuff has very much weight. This is a show that those things were made for. It was in Houston, Texas, Rice Gallery. The fellow who's doing that was my assistant, Jamie, who was one of the best climber, riggers, welders I've ever known. He was an assistant for about 10 years. Studio, making prints. Drawings. A lot of these things are actually drops, from making the prints. That's when they get into galleries and they look expensive. That was Amringer Yoe. Studio, getting thicker. Those drawings are 8 feet by 8 feet, by the way. This is my new material. I'm crazy about it. It's from Bogalusa, Louisiana. A guy named Johnny Power. I think that's his name. He's fantastic. He's about 75. He invented the machine that makes this stuff. I called him up. He said, how in the hell did you get my name? Because he doesn't have a website, doesn't have anything. He invented the machine, and he owns the patent for this ubiquitous, it's called void fill, which I just love. And so I needed to get it before they laminate it with, paper on top of it. So he just said, and what do you do? And I thought, think fast. And I said, I'm a teacher. And he sent me this material for free, hundreds of pounds of it. And we talk. His son runs the place now. But it's this beautiful, beautiful material that does everything I need it to do. It's flexible. It can make anything. It's got a beautiful color. So I think you can see I've been using it. Studio. By the way, this has been going on for 45 minutes. I can do this in an hour, so hold on. You see those things? Those are hats from China. You put them on your head, they're just paper hats. I have a million of them. So paper and cardboard is really, it's not good to have your work be made out of paper and cardboard. But I think after a couple of these shows, I actually haven't had an assistant in the studio, so all these things are made by me, which means they have a pretty handmade aspect to them, but they're also really light. Now everything has light bulbs. Can you tell there are light bulbs? Yeah, you can, because you can't see some of the pieces. That one was in Detroit, Suzanne Hilberry Gallery. She's amazing. She has the most beautiful gallery space I've ever seen. What I like too is the sun shines in there all the time, unless it's not sunny. But most galleries close off the light because they don't want shadows and glaring things, and it spills over the work depending on what time in a great way. So I think it's like just having this, really lively conversation with the daylight. This is in Denver, Colorado, a place called Robichon. I think you can tell I buy lots of, if you need lamps, shades, I have them in every size. I get them on sale. They're really great. A lot of plastics, a lot of light bulbs. This was in Azusa, and no one knows where Azusa is. It's outside of LA. It means A to Z USA. It used to be a military compound, and now it is an evangelical Christian college. Why they wanted me to come there, I don't know, but it was really fun. It was really nice. So I did a show there about a year ago. This is that material. This is upstate. If you're ever upstate, there's a place called CR10. It's run by a woman named Francine Hunter. I forget her, she's got a third name. I knew, she used to be in the city a long, long time ago. She's quite extraordinary. I think it's like Dia, only it's kind of funky. She's, it's really fun to work in these spaces that look like this. These are pieces in the show that came down December 20th or something like that. There's a lot of photography, not photography, like snapshots. It was a two-gallery show. There was the upstairs and the downstairs. The downstairs was with Pavel Zubak, who is known for collecting collage. And so the stuff I did for him was much grittier and earthier. And Loretta Howard is upstairs, and she shows, Larry Poons, Al Held, Ken Nolan, Helen Frankenthaler. Anyway, so this show was really keyed to her stable. And every one of these was given a name, like that one is Jules for Jules Zalitsky. That one was called Blue Note for Al Held. Anyway, this was her back room, much more landscape, floaty stuff, light bulbs. I do love light bulbs. The show just opened a week ago. Old work, but actually half old. This is the newer stuff, more color. you know, oh, that's the last slide. Great, great.